Hi, I'm Kerry Noonan. I'm going to talk today about how to approach Othello. And I am informed in this by my training as a professional actor and working with these texts as an actor works with them, which I think can be useful in the classroom because sometimes it might seem more approachable than treating it with kid gloves as a remarkable work of literature. So some of the stuff that I was taught and that I pass on to my students is that Shakespeare was never meant to be read. He was only meant, his works are meant to be seen in performance. And it is a weird fluke of history and chance that we have his works to read. And so the approach that is taken by English teachers, bless their hearts, I believe to be more artificial. And I tell my students this was popular culture of the day. It's like nobody thought we were going to save the scripts to days of our lives and analyze them 400 years from now. So it was ephemeral. It would come back around in performance, and Shakespeare was an actor writing for other actors, and there are clues in the text that tell us this. So we have to pay attention to the language. That's the first thing, and we have to hear it out loud. And I tell students, read it out loud, listen to it. You can find audio versions of these plays. You can listen to it while you read it, watch a version of it. This will bring you closer to what the play is supposed to be, which is something in performance. And even in Shakespeare's time, if you notice in the play, they always talk about hearing a play. Let us go hear a play, they say to each other. And that's where we get the word audience. Because in Shakespeare's time, they didn't have a lot of special effects, they didn't have a lot of scenery, and it was all about the words and the audience. So we have to pay attention to the words, and how he says things is really important. This is why he invented tons of words, because he needed the right words to say what he wanted to say. And this is why he wrote in verse. So, why did he write in verse, you might ask? And what I will tell you is, it's easier to memorize. Ask yourself if you can recall jingles from your childhood or the theme songs from shows that you liked 20 years ago. You probably can. But if I ask you, oh, you really loved some book that you read, and can you recite a passage from Bleak House? You probably can't. So it's because it's an aid to memorization. It's also cool, but that's also beside the point. So approaching this as an actor, it helps you memorize it. I can memorize a song better than I can memorize a paragraph of prose. And this is because it has rhythm. And the rhythm in Shakespeare is that iambic pentameter thing, and it's not just something for fusty old English professors to care about. It's because it is the rhythm of speak. Oh, what my lord will hap to you today. And everything will fit into that rhyme. And if I forget my words, I know that I must find something that fits into that beat. So it helps you memorize things. It also, I had one teacher, Louis Fantasia, who was working with people before the Globe got up and running in London, but he was working with folks that were going to be working there. He said, in Shakespeare's day, they only got their own part. So you got like half a sentence of what your cue was, and then you just got your stuff. Because they were copying these things by hand, or they had to print it, and that was expensive, and so they're not going to print the whole play for you. What you get is your bits. First of all, it makes you listen a whole lot longer, because you don't know when your bit is going to come up, so I better really listen to your monologue, because maybe my cue is, I don't know if it's coming up next line or 5 minutes from now, I have no idea. So it makes everybody really attentive. But if you look at it, if you do that, you see the shape of your performance. And he said, pay attention to when your character speaks in poetry and when your character speaks in prose. And he said that poetry usually means that there's something important emotionally going on. Prose is often comedy, or it's often just sort of background stuff, exposition, stuff like that. But that poetry is the marker of something important is happening here. If your character has lines that end halfway through and someone else comes in, you're either fighting or in love. Because the only reason to match someone else's, get into their rhythm of speech and come right in on top of it, is because you're flirting like mad or because you're about to kill each other. So to pay attention to those. They had no stage directions in those days. So how can Shakespeare convey what he wants to these actors? These actors who got very little rehearsal time, and they were rehearsing a play, they maybe had a few rehearsals, and you were doing 2 or 3 plays in rep this week, and then you're doing other plays next week. So you have to keep all these things in your head. backstage they used to have a scene outline so everybody could remember where they are in the play and who's exiting and entering from which sides. And that's what you had up, behind the scenes, so you knew where to go. So you have to really pay attention to what is he telling me with the words. And one of the things that one of my teachers, again, I think this was Louis Fantasia again, was to look at how he uses consonants and vowels. Open vowels, a lot of them, means your character is emoting a whole lot. A lot of clipped, fast, hard consonants, you're probably angry. So you get things like Theseus says in Midsummer Night's Dream, and notice I can remember this because it's in poetry, even though I haven't done this for 25 years or more. He's talking to the Amazon, Hippolyta, who he's going to marry. He says, "But oh, how slow methinks this old moon wanes." You can't say that fast. You have to say, oh, he's hoping, he can't wait for that wedding night. Or in a monologue, again, I did this 30 years ago, but here I still have most of the lines. This is Margaret of Anjou in one of the Henry VI, and her husband he kind of goes crazy every now and then. He's just signed away the kingship and the birthright of his son, and she's very angry about this. And he says, well, they enforced me. And she says, "Enforce thee? Art thou king and wilt be forced? I that am but a silly woman, the soldiers should have tossed me on their pikes before I had consented to that act by which my son is disinherited." She's all like, she's really mad. So he puts those cues in there for us. It's written deliberately. Nothing is random, like our students like to say. And he's doing this not only because it serves the character, but it also serves the actor playing the character. You also have to look at, is your character speaking smoothly, or is everything chopped up? If everything's chopped up, are you thinking? Are you excited? If your character has a line, and then there's a big long space until your next thing, they're not doing that just because, oh, I have to fill this out because it's poetry. Maybe Shakespeare's putting it in there because you're pausing. You have to, when you have a half line like that doesn't pick up till another line, you can take that whole beat and think, or you can smush them together, but you get to make that choice. I also tell my students to take a bunch of different colored highlighters and use yellow for one sentence and highlight until you get to the period. Because we tend to think in English that the sentence stops at the end of the line, and that chops it up and you cannot understand it then. So you have to know where the end of the sentence is. And of course, punctuation was very fluid in Shakespeare's day, and there's different versions. There was one set of texts that were, they think that these two actors who were in some of the plays and had small parts went to a publisher and said, "Hey, we can make a quick buck, it's a popular play, we'll tell you what we remember of it," and they recited it, and they kind of know which characters they think they played because those are the scenes that seem the most intact. And then you get the publisher deciding where to put the periods and the commas and stuff. And then you had other more official versions published by Shakespeare's friends. But the punctuation is up for grabs. And so different editors, this is how you make your living as a Shakespearean editor, is you decide where the punctuation goes and you make your argument for it. But it can change the meaning. So I'm going to give you a little example here. So in the version that our students have, this lovely version with no notes on the language or anything, this is Iago's first speech in Act 1, Scene 1. They're mowing the lawn, and that's a lovely sound. I'll talk louder. Okay, Iago says, I'm going to read it going to the sentences. And in between punctuation is when you take a bit of a breath, but not a full breath. So like a semicolon or comma. "Despise me if I do not. 3 great ones of the city in personal suit to make me his lieutenant, oft cap to him, and by the faith of man I know my price, I am worth no worse a place, but he, as loving his own pride and purposes, evades them with a bombast circumstance horribly stuffed with epithets of war, and in conclusion none suits my mediators, for cert, says he, I have already chose my officer." And that's the period. And if you hear that, it's a bunch of stuff. He's upset. It's running all over itself. It's this big, long idea he has to get out there. So this version, which is the Arden, has it slightly differently. "Despise me if I do not. 3 great ones of the city, in personal suit to make me his lieutenant, off cap to him, and by the faith of man, I know my price, I am worth no worse a place. But he, as loving his own pride and purposes, evades them with a bombast circumstance, horribly stuffed with epithets of war, and in conclusion, non-suits my mediators. For cert, says he, I have already chose my officer. This one has 3 sentences in that one speech, which makes you put emphasis on different things. And it has, if you can see here, I do not know if you can, it gives you even more of a space for a pause after in conclusion, beat, 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 non-suits my mediators. So that's how this editor did it. So you can have them go through, they'll all have different versions. You can have them go through with their highlighters and switch colors between sentences and find where the sentences are and see if it changes the meaning. So mostly what I want to say here is I think it's really good to have students try reading this out loud to understand it. I think it's really good to have them not treat this with kid gloves as something that's 400 years old and musty and we mustn't touch it. We must go, oh, Shakespeare. We must get our hands dirty and mess about with it and cut it up and play with it. And it was meant to be heard. It was meant to be said. It was meant to be right up in your face. And we were meant to listen to it as the audience. So that's my spiel on how to approach Shakespeare as an actor.